There's a flower sitting in gardens all over America right now that people can eat in a spring salad, and that will kill a house cat that so much as licks the pollen from its own fur. It's a daylily, and it's just one of 8 quiet, forgiving perennials that come back on their own year after year, asking almost nothing of you. So here is the real question. Which of these tough, easygoing plants belong in your garden, and how do you put them together so something is always in bloom, from spring right through the first frost? Let's start with that daylily. You have almost certainly seen one. The bright orange daylily is the one that grows in thick clumps along driveways, ditches, and old country roads, so common that many people call it the ditch lily and never think to plant it on purpose. It looks cheerful and ordinary. But this ordinary-looking plant holds one of the strangest contradictions in the whole garden. The flowers are food for people. In China and Japan, daylily buds and blossoms have been eaten for hundreds of years, gently cooked into soups and stir-fries, and sold dried in markets under the name golden needles. And yet that very same plant is deadly to cats. Every part of it, the leaves, the flowers, even the pollen, even the water in the vase, can cause sudden and fatal kidney failure in a cat. The same bloom that goes into a human dinner can end a cat's life in a matter of days. So here is the honest, friendly warning, and it matters. If you share your home with a cat, do not plant daylilies and never, ever bring them indoors in a cut arrangement. A curious cat brushing past the flowers and then grooming itself is all it takes. For everyone else, though, the daylily is one of the most forgiving perennials you can grow. It thrives from the cold of Zone 3 down through the warmth of Zone 9. It shrugs off drought, poor soil, and neglect, and it settles into dependable clumps that hold a slope in place or fill a hot, dry strip of ground where fussier plants give up. Here's the small piece of magic in the name. Each single bloom lasts only 1 day. It opens in the morning and is spent by night, but a healthy clump keeps opening fresh flowers, one after another, for weeks on end, so you barely notice the ones it lets go. That is where the name comes from. Daylily in the Old Greek means beauty for a day, a flower that gives you just one perfect day at a time, over and over, all season long. Now, lavender. You know this one by heart, even with your eyes closed. Lavender is the soft, silvery plant with the slender purple spikes and the calming scent that fills soaps, sachets, and grandmother's linen drawers. Most people think of that fragrance as something gentle and sweet, a little bit of comfort tucked into the garden. But that lovely smell is not there to soothe you at all. It is a weapon. The oils that give lavender its perfume, compounds with names like linalool and camphor, are the plant's own quiet defense. What reads to a human nose as calming and pleasant reads to a browsing deer as sharp, bitter, and thoroughly unappetizing. Deer taste with their noses first, and lavender simply tells them to move along. That is why a row of lavender planted along the edge of a garden works like a living, fragrant fence, turning hungry deer away from the tender plants growing behind it. That defense is exactly what makes lavender so useful in a real garden. It loves full sun and sharp, well-drained soil. And here is the part that surprises new gardeners. Lavender actually prefers to be a little dry. Give it rich, damp, generous soil, and it will sulk and rot. The thing that kills lavender is almost never the cold. It is wet feet through the winter. So a bit of gravel around the base to keep the crown dry does more good than any fussing. For cold climates, look for English lavender, the hardiest kind, which comes back reliably down to Zone 5. Plant it where you will brush past it often, along a path or a doorway, because a gentle touch releases that scent into the air. It blooms from late spring into summer, humming with bees the whole while. And the name carries its oldest job of all. Lavender comes from the Latin word lavare, meaning to wash. The Romans tucked it into their baths and their laundry water thousands of years ago, loving the very same scent drifting out of gardens today. Next comes the coneflower. You've seen it standing tall in summer gardens, that cheerful purple daisy with the petals swept back around a stiff, spiky orange center like a little crown. Gardeners love it for its color and for the butterflies it draws in. It looks like a modern garden favorite, something bred for pretty flower beds. But this plant carries a history far older and far more important than most people ever realize. The coneflower, known by its other name, Echinacea, was the single most widely used medicinal plant in all of North American history. Long before it was an ornamental, the tribes of the Great Plains reached for it to treat snakebite, infections, sore throats, and aching teeth. They chewed its root and made it into remedies for wound after wound. It was held in such high regard that when Lewis and Clark crossed the continent, they gathered its roots and seeds and shipped them back east to President Thomas Jefferson in the year 1805, listing it among their most prized discoveries. That toughness that healed people still lives in the plant, and it makes coneflower a gift in the garden. It is a hardy native, comfortable from zone 3 to zone 9, happy in full sun, and it drinks very little once its roots take hold. It blooms from the middle of summer right up to the first frost, and here is the quiet trick that seasoned gardeners lean on. When fall comes, resist the urge to cut it back. Leave those dried, spiky seed heads standing all winter long. They hold their shape under the snow, giving the garden something beautiful to look at in the cold months, and they become a feeding station for goldfinches, who perch on the stems and work the seeds loose through the coldest weeks of the year. Leave it be, and it will gently sow a few seedlings of its own, giving you new plants for free. Snip the spent flowers instead, and it stays right where you put it. And there is a small delight hidden in the name. Echinacea comes from the old Greek word for hedgehog, echinos, named for that stiff, prickly center cone that you cannot help but run a fingertip across. Now let's talk about the hosta. Almost every gardener knows this one. The hosta is the broad-leaved, mounding plant that fills those difficult, shady corners where nothing else seems to want to grow. Under trees and along the north side of the house, in cool green and blue and gold. People plant it for its leaves and think of it as purely decoration, a quiet, dependable filler and nothing more. But there is a secret folded up inside those spring shoots. The hosta is a vegetable in disguise. In Japan, where it grows wild along forest streams and mountainsides, the tightly rolled young shoots are a prized wild green with a name of their own. They call it urui. People gather it in spring, boil it, fry it into tempura, or eat it fresh in a salad, and the flavor lands somewhere between asparagus and sweet lettuce. That ornamental plant sitting in the shade has been quietly feeding families across the mountains of Japan for generations. Here is the honest caution that comes with it. While hosta is a food for people, it is toxic to dogs, cats, and horses. If your pet chews on the leaves, it can bring on an upset stomach, vomiting, or worse. So this is one to keep animals away from. And there is a second warning every hosta grower learns sooner or later. You are not the only one who finds it tasty. Slugs, rabbits, and above all, deer adore it. In a yard with heavy deer traffic, a lush hosta can be grazed to bare stems overnight, so it pairs best with those aromatic, deer-resisting plants standing guard nearby. Give it shade, rich soil, and a little moisture, and it will return faithfully from zone 3 to zone 9, growing more handsome every single year. And here is the fact worth sharing over the garden fence. The hosta belongs to the asparagus family. It is a true cousin of the very spear you roast for dinner, which is exactly why those tender spring shoots taste so familiar on the tongue. Now, Salvia, you have probably watched it work without knowing its name. Salvia sends up tall, slender spikes crowded with little blossoms in deep blue, royal purple, and fiery red, and on a summer afternoon those spikes seem to shiver with visiting bees. Most people see a pretty flower for a sunny bed. What they are actually looking at is one of the finest hummingbird machines you can plant. Those tubular blossoms are shaped almost perfectly for a hummingbird's slender beak, and the red and blue kinds, with charming names like Black and Blue, are among the most dependable hummingbird magnets in the entire garden. A single stand of salvia in bloom can pull those tiny darting birds in close, again and again, all season long. And here is the lovely twist. The very same aromatic oils that scent the leaves and help fuel that display also make the plant unappealing to deer. So the flowers that feed the hummingbirds keep the deer politely at a distance. That makes Salvia a genuine workhorse in a real garden. It loves full sun and well-drained soil. It asks for little water once it settles in, and it blooms for a remarkably long stretch, from late spring right through to frost. There's one honest thing to know before you plant. The true perennial sages like the woodland salvia come back faithfully from zone 3 to zone 9, but many of the showiest kinds are tender and are grown as one-season annuals in colder gardens. So it is worth checking the label for the type you are bringing home. And here is the easiest win in all of perennial care. When that first flush of flowers begins to fade, simply shear the spent spikes back and the plant will answer with a whole fresh wave of bloom. The name holds its oldest secret. Salvia comes from the Latin word salvere, meaning to be well or to be saved. In the old healing gardens of Europe, the sages were the plants people trusted to keep them in good health. Now comes the black-eyed Susan. This is one nearly everyone recognizes. The black-eyed Susan is that cheerful golden daisy with the dark chocolate button at its heart, the flower that sets roadsides and meadows glowing all through late summer. It looks like the picture of a reliable, come-back every year perennial, and gardeners plant it by the thousands, trusting it to do exactly that. But there is a quiet catch that catches a lot of people by surprise. The most common and beloved kind, the one sold everywhere, is barely a true perennial at all. Its botanical name is Rudbeckia hirta, and it is actually short-lived, sometimes lasting only a season or two before it fades away. The reason it seems to live forever in the same sunny spot is that it scatters its own seeds so freely and so generously that fresh plants keep springing up to replace the old ones. What looks like one long-lived flower bed is really a rolling, self-renewing crowd, always making its own next generation. If you want a single clump that truly settles in and returns year after year from the same roots, you want the sturdier variety called goldsturm. Either way, this is a plant that earns its place. It shines in full sun, laughs off heat and dry spells, and stands up beautifully from zone 3 to zone 9. Best of all, it fills that awkward late summer gap, the stretch when the spring flowers have long finished and the garden can start to look tired. Deer tend to leave it alone, and when the blooms fade, the dark seed heads feed songbirds straight through the winter. It sits perfectly beside coneflower, sedum, and waving ornamental grasses. If you would like proof that plant breeders take it seriously, a newer variety named American Gold Rush, prized for shrugging off disease, was crowned Perennial Plant of the Year in 2023. And here is the little fact to tuck away. The black-eyed Susan is the state flower of Maryland. Now, Sedum. Chances are you have seen this one filling a fall garden. Sedum, and especially the favorite kind called Autumn Joy, grows in tidy, rounded clumps of thick, fleshy leaves, and by late in the year it lifts up broad, flat clusters of tiny flowers that start soft pink and slowly deepen to a rich copper red. It looks like an ordinary flowering perennial, one of the crowd, but it is quietly keeping a secret about what it really is. Sedum is a succulent hiding in plain sight in ordinary temperate gardens. Those plump, juicy leaves are built to store water inside themselves, in the very same way a desert cactus does. That is the whole secret to its toughness. While the plants around it are drooping and begging for the hose in a long, dry spell, Sedum simply lives off the water it has tucked away in its own leaves, staying full and upright and calm as if nothing were wrong at all. That built-in canteen makes it a joy to grow. It thrives in full sun and truly does not want to be pampered. Poor, lean soil suits it perfectly, while rich soil only makes it grow soft and flop open in the middle. So this is one plant you can happily neglect. And here is why it matters so much to the wider garden. Sedum is a closer. It saves its big show for late summer into fall, blooming exactly when almost everything else is winding down, right when bees and butterflies are desperate for one last meal before winter and migration. On a warm autumn afternoon, a single clump can hum with dozens of them at once. Deer and rabbits tend to pass it by. And if you leave the faded flower heads standing, they hold their shape and catch the snow, giving the winter garden something lovely to look at. And here is the fact worth passing along. Sedum's old country name is stonecrop, earned from its wild cousins that root and thrive right on bare rocks and stone walls, living on almost no soil at all. And last of all, the peony. This is the flower of memory. The peony gives those big, ruffled, full blooms in soft pink, white, and deep red, so heavy with petals and so sweetly scented that they seem to belong to another, gentler time. Many people picture them in a grandmother's yard, and there is a beautiful reason for that, because a peony can outlive the very person who planted it. A herbaceous peony is one of the longest-lived plants you will ever put in the ground. Given a decent spot, it can bloom faithfully for 100 years or more, opening its flowers in the same place, spring after spring, long after the hands that planted it are gone. Out in the countryside, you can still find peonies blooming all alone in an empty field, quietly marking the corner where a farmhouse once stood, the house long vanished, the flowers carrying on without it. When you plant a peony, you are not really planting for this year at all. You are planting something that will very likely still be blooming when you are old and long after. That remarkable life makes it the ultimate plant once. Enjoy, forever, perennial. It is happy from zone 3 to zone 7. Deer tend to leave it be, and it actually resents being dug up and moved. So the kindest thing you can do is choose its home carefully and then simply leave it in peace. There is one rule that makes all the difference between a peony that blooms and one that only makes leaves. Do not plant it too deep. Those little growth buds on the root should sit only about an inch or two beneath the soil. Bury them deeper than that, and the plant may sulk for years and never give you a single flower. And if you have ever seen ants crawling over a peony bud and worried, let this put your mind at ease. The old story that the flower needs the ants to open is simply a myth. The peony blooms perfectly well without them. The ants are only there for the sweet nectar on the bud, and in return they chase off other pests, a small friendly bargain between insect and flower. There is one last thing this flower carries. The peony was the traditional bloom of Decoration Day, the holiday we now call Memorial Day. In the late spring, it was one of the few flowers open in time, and families gathered armfuls of it to lay upon the graves of soldiers, its lush blossoms standing in for gratitude and for memory. And here is the quiet reward for gathering these 8 plants together. Chosen well, they hand the season off to one another like a relay, so something is always in bloom. In late spring, the peony and the lavender open first. Then, as summer settles in, the coneflower, the salvia, and the black-eyed Susan carry the color through the warm months, humming with bees and hummingbirds. When they begin to fade, the sedum steps forward and holds that copper glow all the way to the first frost. And in the shady corners where the sun never reaches, the hosta keeps everything green and lush from spring to fall. Set the sun lovers out front and the hosta in the shade, and you have a border that wakes up on its own every single year, asking almost nothing of you and gives back for a lifetime. Thank you for watching. If you want another story right now, there is one waiting for you on your screen. And if you enjoyed this one, subscribe so you never miss the next.